What on guys, Commander, and welcome to a new video where I'm going to be showing you how to 3D model. As you're aware, if you've been paying attention to the channel, I've done a couple of videos about 3D modeling, and if you've been paying attention to my Instagram page, link in the description, you will see that I've been showcasing a lot of what I have created on my Instagram page. So my TK troopers in the past that I've modeled, and also more recently my clone troopers, right? So, and in one of my videos about I did documenting my 3D modeling process, I said that I would do a video about how to 3D model from start to finish, right? Or at least from the start of 3D modeling up until substance painting, because I've done videos on substance painting already where I don't need to do that again. But this whole Blender workflow and actually modeling something is what this is what I'm going to be doing today. I'm going to show you how to model inside of Blender and how a whole modeling workflow, right? Now, I had two options about what I was going to model. I could either model a DC-17, so the pistol that Captain Rex uses, or a clone airborne helmet, right? Because that's one of the things I have a model that I could do with for my clone collection as well. Now, I'm going to be doing the DC-17 today, mainly because it's a lot easier and simpler. Now, I'm not choosing it just because it's easier and simpler, but for the sake of this YouTube video, it's just going to streamline and workflow a lot easier. Whereas the airborne trooper, I could be working on that for like 3 days straight, right? Maybe even longer. I think I just recently did a phase 1 clone trooper, and I think that took me about, like, granted, it wasn't constant work. I was doing it doing other things in between, but that took me the best part of a week and a half to complete. Just the modeling itself, but disregard the troubleshooting with the UV maps and everything, right? So that's the reason why. And the airborne trooper model, helmet model, is not exactly non-complicated, right? The phase 1 clone trooper, for better or for worse, is quite a simplistic model to follow, whereas the airborne trooper is very complicated. And I just don't want to make my life editing this and recording it any worse, because a lot of this is going to be me showing you what to do, and then there's going to be a time lapse until I get to the next stage, if that makes sense. So with this pistol I'm going to be modeling, there's not really going to be too much of that because it's quite a simple model to make. But if I was to do the airborne trooper, it would be a lot more of that, right? Because the model is a lot more complicated. My Ko-Fi page offers a wide variety of custom textured models, as well as models that I have created myself for use in your 3D scenes. This includes Commander Cody, Captain Vaughn, and a TK trooper. I'll also be adding a clone trooper weapon pack, including the DC-17 that I'll be modeling today. I also have commissions open, so send me a message on Instagram or Ko-Fi for more information. Links in the description. First things first, we're going to get the DC-17 model in for referencing. I've got it in my Google Drive, so I shall chuck that in here. Scale it up by 10. You can do it doesn't particularly matter. You can scale up however much you want. Get rid of the skeleton because we don't need it. And this is what we're going to be using as the base model, right? Now, what I would recommend you do, anybody who 3D models, right? So this is my workflow. I start off with the base model, if I can. So my TK trooper, my clone troopers, I've modeled a DC-15 and DC-15A as well, which is the rifle and the pistol from Star Wars. Well, the base has been modeled on a separate model that I got from Battlefront 2, right? And then what I did in between was I got a load of reference images, and then any detailing that needed doing, I would match that up to what I had in Blender. So let's say, for example, my TK trooper that I did, I got that model off of Gmod, right? And I modeled the basic model off of Gmod. And then once I finished, I went back and looked at, it took about, I think I must say about 8 to 10 screenshots of TK troopers from the Bad Batch TV show, and married that up with what I had in Blender. And any details like around the mouth, around the visor, or maybe the shoulders are a bit too big, or maybe the hand plate's a bit too small or something, marry that up and see what I can get. You don't have to use a base model to start your modeling process, but personally for me, this is the way I do it because it's a lot easier for me. If you want to, you can set up the textures if you want to. Now, I would only you can add the color if you want to, but it's not necessary. It depends on what the model is, right? So if I go into shader mode, it's still quite shiny. Considering that if I go into the unshade, the viewport mode, it still looks a bit shiny. So I'm going to actually do it on this and see how far we get to. Right, so first things first is, now the way that I do this is I'm going to model this in cubes and cylinders. And this is where it's different. My clone trooper stuff, I modelled in just planes, right? 90% of it was just planes, right? So planes that I extrude and trace over, and then I add a solidify modifier to make it thicker. I can do that with this. I can do this with this quite easily, but the problem with doing it with this is it's not even a problem. Doing it in planes is a bit more complex because it's a bit more irritating. Whereas cubes is easier because you can move the geometry around a lot easier to exactly where you need it to be. So what I'm going to start with, I'm going to go cube. Also, if you want to keep an eye on keystrokes and don't know what I'm doing, I've got my keystroke thing down at the bottom. If I scale this down, and I scale by this axis as well, scale that down a bit. Then what I can do is I can go into edit mode and just sort of set it so it's just on the border. Now, if you border it up like this, it actually works to me remarkably well. So then what I can do, then go on this end, bring that to the foreground like that, and then bring this as far back as it'll go. And actually, what I can do is I can bring it to there. Because then what I can do is I can then go into the edge mode, lift this edge thing up a little bit, just to about there. This side looks, okay, that's doing the same thing, so let's bring that up as well, like that. And then what we can do later on, we won't do it now, we're going to do it later on, is we can then bevel these edges so they are curved, which matches the reference. And that'll be the same for these bits. It would just be the case of putting a cube there and just beveling the edge. So now what we can do is we can click this edge. Now we could make this bit here a separate cube and then attach that onto it. But what we can do is, if you enable in your preferences, there's a add-on called loop tools. So if you go into edit preferences, add-ons, loop tools, what you can do is if you click an edge and click Control R, you can add your own loop onto your model, right? And then you can drag it to where you want to. And then what you can do is that basically splits the model in half. And then what you can do is you can then click this half that you want, because it's lined up perfectly to this back end and this front end that's curved. Lift this up into this break bit here, because that's as far as we really want it to go, because otherwise it starts interfering with this top bit. And then you can shift it across like that, right? And if this bit's a bit too far across, what you can actually do is, I just noticed this bit here, go back into the edge selector, lift this up a bit, so that's then in line like that, and then you can bring this one back. And it doesn't have to be perfect, just as long as you've got the rough shape as it should be, right? So then you can bring this one back a little bit, like that, and then that's that curve or that edge already atoned for. And what we can do now is, if we go back into edge thing, select this edge, Control R again, and there we've got a gap, which we can then use to extrude. And if you click, there we go, like that. So what I did there is, when you click in Blender, any action you do, you can choose which axis you want to do it on, right? So if you click, if I go back, so by default, it's on its own local axis, right? That's what the local axis, so the local axis is pointed downwards, that's where the local axis is going to. But if you want it to do what I just did, which is go straight across, if you click, if you click Y, that's on the Y axis, that's going straight across. If you want it to go straight downwards, you click the Z axis, it will go completely straight down. If you want it to go across, then you choose the X axis. Right, now if you want to be sure which axis it is that you're actually on, you go up the top in the corner here, so you can see Z axis is up down, Y axis is left right, and X axis is like this. Now it might be slightly different, because let's say you're facing this way, then the X axis is going to be across, and Z axis is going to be up down. Alright, so what I've got, so I've made a bit more progress on just doing this bit here. And what you can do is if you want to check your progress on either side, so you want to get rid of what you've done just to check your reference, you can hide it with that. Or if you want to see how well you've done with your modeling, you can do that. Now it doesn't really look like much at the moment, but that's because we haven't hardly done anything, right? We're just doing this little top bit. But now this bit, I'm interested to see how this is going to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a loop cut right about there, and then I'm going to put a loop cut in the middle bit. So what I should be able to then do, and actually what I will do is I'll put another loop cut there and put another one there. So what I do here doesn't interfere with everything else, right? So then what I can actually do is then I can then put another loop cut just there, and then move that into the corner like that. Do the same one here, and then I can put another one in the corner just like that. Right, now there's two things that I can do here. I'm going to leave it for the moment because I want to see how the subdivision will work with this, right? There might be the case I need to put another couple of loop cuts in, right? But if I get rid of this and then I go into there, that doesn't look that great. And for the sake of topology's purposes, I'm actually going to move this. What I will do is I'm going to move that one out into the corner like that, and then that over there like that. There we go. It's not perfect, but it will do. Now I can bring this like that, and move that like that. There we go. Not perfect, but again, does the job. Right. So next point is now what I'm going to do. I'm going to carry on as I would do normally, just modeling. I'm going to speed up. I'm not going to cut anything out of this video apart from like me bumbling over my words as I always do anyway. Yeah, I say that, but the recording version of me, when I was actually doing this video, didn't realise how long I was recording for. And the first half of this video took an hour and 20 minutes worth of recording, which I only managed to concise into 40 minutes. So, and the whole video in its entirety is 3.5 hours long, right? So there is no way whatsoever, and so far I've condensed it down to 1 hour 7 minutes. I'm in the process of still trying to condense it down even further, but there is no way in God's earth that I'm going to get this any less than an hour while keeping everything in the video, even in a time-lapse fashion, because all the speeding up that you see is all done at 500 times the speed. So, and that still brings it to an hour and 7 minutes. There's no way that I'm going to be able to include everything, but I'd include the important bits so you get the gist of what I'm doing. But I'm going to carry on and get on with as much of this model as I can, and then if I do something that I think needs talking about, then I'll come back and talk about it. Also, just something I do want to point out, and this is why it's good to model things in parts, right? So what I've just noticed here with this section of this model, right, is that there's certain parts like this that are not quite aligned. Now, if I had attached this cube here to this outside one that I've got here, so this one that's flashing here is linked to this one here, I wouldn't be able to edit this back corner bit because it would all link in together, which is why it's good to keep everything separately, because then you can go back and then change it. So, and also, the second point I want to show you is if you want to, let's say, select, so if I go into, let's say, this, switch back on this model, this little bit here is not quite aligned. So what I can do is maneuver it, but I need to select all the edges, otherwise it's not going to work properly. So what you can do is if you click Alt and then whichever line it is, it will select all the lines in that row. So then what you can do is if I turn this back on, I can then maneuver this downwards and then acrosswards. And the same thing I can do with this if I can then need to move it downwards. Like that. There we go. So then it sort of aligns a bit better, right? So that's just a little tidbit that if you want to align something a bit better, that's the way you go about doing it. Also, another point while I think about it, if you're, let's say you're over here, right, and you want to zoom in to this cube down here, it's been a little bit, it's not, that wasn't too bad. I can zoom into that quite well, but sometimes you zoom in and you run out of scroll, right, and it goes really slow. The way you do that is if you click the area that you want to, this works in edit mode as well as object mode. If you scroll it, if you click the area that you want to zoom into and then click the full stop on your number pad, if you've got an, I don't know whether it works. Does it work if it's normal? No, it doesn't. So if you've got a number pad, click the point on your, like, full stop on your number pad, and it will zoom in. If you haven't got a number pad, I'm not entirely sure how it works. If you Google it, you'll probably be able to find out. If I can find out how to do it, I'll put it on the screen now. But that's how, if you've got a number pad, that's how you do it. You click the full stop on your number pad on your PC or laptop. Right, just something else I've just thought thinking about now that I'm just about to do. So if you've got, so what I've got here is I've got this little like accent bit at the top of the pistol, right? Now, as you can see, this bit here is exactly the same shape, but it's the reverse, right? So it's inverted, right? Now you can completely redo this one again, ready for that one, but if you want to make your life easier, if you control duplicate it, and then if you go Control A and then apply rotation and scale, you'll see here that it's basically locked my rotation and my scale back to 0 and 1. If you set your scale, I think it's on my x-axis, this one. Yeah, it is. X is across. So if you set the x-axis to -1, that'll invert it. And then if you set the x location to minus whatever it happens to be, that'll then mirror it onto this side. Right? Now you can use a mirror modifier, but mirror modifiers only tend to work within the model exactly that you're modeling, right? So if let's say I was working on this bit from this front view and I didn't want to model this side as well as this side, and I was doing it as a plane, I would use a mirror modifier in that instance, but it doesn't work with two separate areas of two separate models, if that makes sense. So that's why you do it this way. It's an easy way to mirror, and it saves you a bit of work, especially if what you're modeling on both sides is exactly the same. So again, little tidbits just to help, because this is what I mean when I say about modeling in Blender. The actual main crux of it isn't that difficult, especially when you've got a reference model like this to essentially trace from. It's not rocket science, but there's little tidbits in there that when I learned Blender, I wish that I knew, and that will probably help you when you're modeling. But I'm showing you a way to do it that can get you invested into doing it without, where you can make something that even if you're tracing this, you're going to get halfway decent model, right? And then what to do with it afterwards, right? Because that's how I learned, right? And I'm going to get to a stage at some point where I can look at an image and I can say, right, let's model a Stormtrooper helmet just from let's say, like, a Stormtrooper image, right? And let's do that. I'm not at that stage yet, but I started with this, right? So that's what I'm trying to show you, a way of easily getting into it, and then you can build your skills off from that, right? Does that make sense? I hope so. Right, what I'm going to do here just quickly is I want to show you how to join up models. Now, I'm only doing this for the basis of inverting them and chucking them onto this side, right? Now, I'll show you how to combine all the meshes together in a bit later on, but just for the sake of... Now, if you're going to do this, there's two ways you can do it. You can do it individually, or you can do it together, right? For the sake of ease, I'm going to do them all together, right? But my advice is that if you've got a complex model, if you're trying to invert and duplicate a complicated set of model, and you can't afford for it to break, you can't afford to do that bit of the model again if it breaks when you're joining and inverting, my advice is either duplicate that model and hide it. So what I would do is, if let's say this particular mesh was a complicated model I spent the past 10 minutes trying to create, I would duplicate it and then hide it. This one's still here, but you've got a duplicate of it down there. Now, what you can do if you want to be really organized is make this one as a backup, add a different collection as backup, make that visible, chuck that down there, and then hide this collection. So that's your backups, right? Now, so that's the one way of doing it, right? So if you've got a complicated model and you want to do it the way I'm doing it, join it all together, but you want to be able to go back in case you make a mistake or you want to change it, do that. Or what you could do is do what I'm going to do. If it's a simple model, select all of the meshes, go to Object to Join, that then makes them one model, and then do what we did at the top here with the inverting. Select this, Control All, Rotation and Scale, minus the x-axis, the x scale, and then because this is already on the minus location over here already, we can just get rid of the minus, and that'll go back to the original. Now, the one thing that I didn't do, which I'm going to do now, because I'm not very smart, is I didn't duplicate it first. So that just inverted the original model. So what I can do now, I've duplicated it, do the whole process again. So that's that bit done. And like I said, I don't need this in the backup, but for the sake of showing you, especially when you're doing things like, you know, modeling, let's say, like a chest plate or a shoulder plate that you've spent like 10, 15 minutes or more working on, it's good to have backups, because if you, let's say, then apply everything all together, so let's say you've got like a shoulder pad with an antenna like I've got for my clone Marshall, if I've applied those two together and I've stuck those together, if I need to go and adjust the shoulder pad for whatever reason, I then can't do it because it's attached to the antenna, right? So, or vice versa, if I need to adjust the antenna, I can't because it's attached to the shoulder plate. So that's why it's beneficial to have a backup, right? So obviously, your Blender file, back it up, definitely. That's something I cannot recommend highly enough. Back up your Blender saves, but also within your Blender saves, back up your models. It just makes life so much easier, and it means you don't have to be too sort of risk cautious when you're modeling, right? All right, I just to interject now, because I just want to show you something that you need to that I'm going to do now, which I think is worthwhile showing. Something I find quite interesting is I don't know whether it came across that much with the time lapse of me modeling, right? In time lapse of the video that I'm showcasing. This bit of the like, I'm a competent enough 3D modeler, right? But I'm not up there with like the experts of people that can make, you know, game ready assets and things like that, right? So I don't consider myself to be an expert by any means. I'm still learning. I'm learning as I'm doing things, right? I'm not sure if it came across that well in the video, but this bit of the model, of the reference model, my god, this is a pain in the bum, right? But this bit especially, like once I add I'll clean it up a bit later on, and then once I've had a subdivision, so that's why I tested with the my subdivision surface modifier in the time lapse, and I wanted to actually see how it looked. But it doesn't look that great, right? I really struggled with this particular bit. Now, even if I put it on like auto smooth, because the edges are so like jagged, it still shows them up. But anyway, back to what I actually started talking for the purpose of. So what we've got here is we've got these two parts of the model that aren't like connected together, and I'm going to connect them together. So what we need to do first is we need to add a loop cut into, no, that's the wrong thing. Control R, that's it. Loop cut. Put a loop cut into there. Now what we can do is part of the loop. Now what? No, it's not part of the loop tools. What Blender has built into it is an auto merge feature, right? So at the top here, you saw me do it a little bit earlier, but I decided not to pause it because the reason why that happened was because of an error that I made, right? Because I didn't have Blender set up properly, and I couldn't. So I extruded something too much in the wrong way. But my undo limit was set to 5 instead of 30 because I reverted it back because I was doing something with something else. So I couldn't actually undo it enough, right? So, but it's at 32 now, so what I can do is just rectify that particular mistake, right? But what you can do is you can merge your vertices up together, right? So if you've got two like ends of models that you want to put together, what you can do is if you go up to this top bit, it will be an increment to begin with, but you want to set it to vertex, and then if you click this magnet, it will show up on the magnet, and if you go to tools, under options, if you select auto merge, what you can do is if you select a particular vertex, press G, and then hold it over that vertex you want to connect it to, that will then connect it as if it's one object, right? And so we do the same thing with this one. Select that vertex, press G, and do that. Same thing with this one under here. G, click the vertex, G onto there. And same thing with this one. Click the vertex, G, easy. Select vertex, G, connected. Select the vertex, G, easy. And what that then does is that's then all connected to one model, right? But just make sure you uncheck it first. You only need to uncheck the magnet. Everything else is fine to keep enabled, but just uncheck that magnet. Because when you start then extruding things again, it's going to start jumping in between the vertices of the models that already exist, and it's a pain in the bum. And you'll start when I first started doing it, I was like, why is it jumping about so much? Just because the magnet's still active. So that's that bit I just want to go over. So we'll get back into time lapsing. Also, if you want to, just as a point as well, while I think about it, and while I'm just literally about to do it myself. So I said to you before, but if you click Alt and then select what you want to do, it will loop around the whatever it is you want to select. So that works for both vertices, edges, and faces, if that depending on your situation. What you can also do is, if you want to multi-select, you hold Shift and then you start clicking. You can do that. Alternatively, if you want to select the entire line, you select the first face, click Control and the end face of the path you want to make, and then that will make a path of your particular selection, right? Just a little tidbit, just in case anybody was wondering. Alright, so what I want to just do quickly now is to... I said that before that I wanted... I actually didn't intend for this to happen, but it actually sort of come out as sort of the perfect sort of thing, really. So I was just looking at this grip part of this model here, right? And I thought, well, can I do it? Let's just set up a cube and do it, right? But the actual grip itself looks like it sort of like molds around in one whole mesh, right? Now, I can do that as part of a cube, But what would be a better idea, which I'm going to do, because that will do well for the video, is I'm going to model this with a singular plane, right? And then just show you how I go about doing that for when I'm doing like helmet modeling, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a plane, tip it on its y-axis, sorry. Then maneuver that down here. Now, it doesn't particularly matter which side you start on, just as long as you start on a side of some description, right? So if you start, so the best way that I would do it is start off down at the bottom in a corner like that, right? And then what I do is then I just line this up like that, right? Don't worry about this side, that's not hugely important. But then what you can do is then you can select the top, so let's say you go edge select, and then extrude upwards, right? So, and then we'll follow the... Oh, no, what am I doing there? Never mind. We'll extrude on the Z-axis, up like that, up to the top where you can see the edge, and then just sort of shift it across like that, where you can see it just on the edge there. Now, what I can do here, now what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to bring this edge inwards a little bit, because you can see that that's where that goes up. So what I will do there is I should extrude this on my y-axis across like that, and then move that on the z-axis up top like that. So now what I can do is I can line this up, and I can use my vertex selection and then just like fine-tune detail the little bits like that, down there like that, then like that, and the same thing with down here. Not end of the world, because it's going around the mesh anyway, but that's like that. That can then extrude out, so it's touching this corner bit here, and then that can go out so that matches that like that, right? Now, if I go on the edge here, what you can then do is that you can see actually that it's not as lined up as it looks. So what you can do is you can actually fix this so it lines up, and then do it the same way we were doing with the cube. So if it's, make sure it's touching the actual mesh and then line it up like that. Now the reason why you start it in a side view is just to get the rough shape, right? Because then you can go, because if you do it in actual like 3D orbit view, it's going to look strange because it's going to throw you off, right? So start every reference from a side view just to give you the basic shape, and then go and adjust it later on, right? So to be fair, I don't pretty much bang on the money here, so that will work like that, and then move this in like that. That's pretty much onto the edge, and so's that, and then I can move that one down onto the edge like that. That's fine. That one's fine. That one is in like that. And like that. Cool. Then I can shift that one in like that. Cool. Right, so now what I can then do is, now, should I do it this way or should I do it? Right, so, no, I'm not. I'm going to do it this way. Right, so then what you can do is you can select all those edges and then go extrude, and then go like that, so it's down there just like that, right? Cool. So now that's wrapping around the mesh. Now, if I turn off that mesh, right, and I'll just maneuver this in like that and down there, and then maneuver that so it's in there like that. Now that looks too flat. So what you can do, and this is one of the issues with using planes, is that the planes by default are a bit too flat. But this is where the loop cuts come in. So if I add a loop into there, then what I can do is I can go back into my vertex selection. I can alt select my vertexes, and then I can pull them out so they've got a bit more of a curve to them. Now, it doesn't have to be a perfect curve, because like I said, once we add our subdivision surface modifier, it will smoothen everything out anyway. But this is just to get the rough, smooth detail of it there, right? Now, considering that the actual both sides are exactly the same, what I can do is should be able to add a mirror modifier to this, and it should be exactly the same on the other side. So if I go mirror modifier, and then set it to... Right, got it. I done a bit of faff there because I didn't really quite know what was going wrong. So, if it doesn't work automatically, now, if you want my advice, I would say get your mirror modifier working straight away, right? Because if it doesn't work straight away, then you're going to have what I've just had, which is issues in it not working as it should do properly, right? But I've got it working now so if let's say you were following along with the tutorial, and you're at this stage, right, and it was only showing, so if I just get rid of this of what I was doing, and it was showing x-axis, but it was showing there like this, and no matter which axis you choose to work it on, it just doesn't work, right? What you need to do is you need to select which object you want to mirror, and you need to select that. So in this case, it's the DC-17 pistol, and then on the x-axis, it'll mirror perfectly, right? So that's that point done. Now, next point, which is the point that I actually was supposed to talk about, is if we go... So, if I do that they are not going to merge, right? Which is useless, because you want them to merge. Now, what you could do is you could use the magnet merge, so you can apply the mirror modifier, and you can then magnet merge them, which is what we were doing before. Alternatively, what you can do is you can select clipping, and then what you can do is you can then bring these across, and they will then, well, they should stick together. Yeah, now they've stuck together, right? So they ain't going nowhere, and that will stay there when you apply the mirror modifier, right? That's an easier way to do it. But the good thing about this is that if you disable the mirror modifier, it's fine. It's gone back to the way it was, right? Whereas the issue with the magnet thing is that unless you have enough undo, unless you hit your limit of the amount of times you can undo something in your project, your magnet modifier, your magnet merging thing that we were doing earlier is destructive, right? Whereas this is non-destructive, which is good. Now, that's also a good point, is that you should always use a non-destructive workflow where you can, right? So, next point that I want to do is I want to show you the solidify modifier. Now, I'm not entirely sure whether this is going to work or not, but we'll find out. So, if I go, I just want to pull this one out a little bit because that's not quite in line there, which it is now. Cool. And then what I'll do is I'll then pull this one forward as well, just so that's in line like that. Cool. And because you can't see, it doesn't matter, so that's all good. So, now, if we go and add a solidify modifier, what we should be able to is we should be able to include the thickness, and it goes like that. Perfect. Right. So, what the solidify modifier does, so there's two ways you can do this. You can either extrude so if I just hide this, there's two ways to do it. You can either extrude like this and then follow it around each of the edges and do it that way. Alternatively, you can add a solidify modifier, apply the thickness levels to however much you want, and that will do each edge automatically. And also, benefit to this is, again, like the mirror modifier, because it's a modifier, it's non-destructive until you apply it. Once you apply it, it's destructive, right? But you've got the option of it being non-destructive, right? Which is very good for when you're trying to 3D model, right? So that is two extra things, the mirror modifier and the solidify modifier, which we can use for making the grid, right? So that's yeah, that's it. Right, so I've moved on. I've got a bit more progress on this excuse me, model at the moment. So now I wanted to show you a few little things that I'm going to do next, which should be useful for you to know. So let's start off with the barrel of the pistol, starting off like with a cylinder. So I've done it. I can't remember whether it's part of the video or not. I haven't really got around to looking at it, but that's a cylinder. So just start off a cylinder like we did with the cube. Start off with a cylinder and line it up. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the more in line you can make it, the better it's going to look. And then what we can do, if you go into edit mode, go to face select and select this edge face. If you click I, it'll inset the model. So what you can do is you can then make that into a barrel, right? So if you set it just so it's just about like that, so it's in line with the muzzle of the barrel, And then what you can do is if you just select that inverted bit, like I've got there, if you click E to extrude inwards, you can then make the barrel, right? And then push it in just so it lines up with the actual barrel on the reference. And then what you do is if you get rid of that, you've then got the barrel of the pistol, right? And it's as easy as that, right? So now what we'll do is we'll go and do this back bit. And then I think that's pretty much, we've got this little bit to do here as well, which is another thing that I will show you is about booleans, right? So that's another little tidbit that I can show you as well. Now what you can do, I will actually show you something else quickly while I think about it, is if you're in this situation where you've got a section of the model that is a bit hidden, what you can do is, if your model is split up into parts, so the reference model, some models you might not be able to do this, but in this particular instance, I think I can. So if you click L on your in edit mode, on preferably face selector, but you can do it on the others as well. If you click L, it will select the different parts of that mesh, right? And then what you can do, if you then click P and then separate by selection, that will separate that into a separate model. So then what I can do is then I can move that out where I don't need it. So then what I can do, it makes life easier with lining this up, because then I can see it from the exact angle that I need it to be. So now what, like we did with the barrel of the gun, we'll go inset like that, and then we'll go extrude outwards up to there. Cool. And now what we've got is we've got that little bit of the working just like that. And then what we can do is you can bring this one back over to here. And then this is the easy bit, because this is just a squash cylinder. Oh no, it is in line, but it's two separate. Okay, right. So what I'll do then is I shall set it so it's in line with the outside, because this bit's a bit lower down. So we'll do the inset again. Right. So what I'll then do is I'll then set this face, inset like this, and then extrude it only slightly. It doesn't need huge amounts, but it just adds to the effect of it. With this side's perfectly fine, but this side needs a bit of an inset in it. Right, so there we go, and that's that bit done. Cool. Making very steady, but very good progress. Right, so now what I'm going to do, just going to show you about the Boolean modifier. It's the way you make holes in meshes without, I don't want to say breaking the topology, because there's actually a better way of doing it if you want to be really topology specific, but it's a bit of a faff, right? So there's two ways you can go about doing it, right? So if I switch on my reference model again, you can see quite clearly where the hole is supposed to be, right? So two ways of doing this is to make loop cuts in like a square around the hole area. Then you extrude and cut out a hole, and then what you do is you bevel the corners so they look a bit more of a shape, right? Which is what I actually did on the back of my clone trooper, because the back plate has got circles in it. Now, they're not perfect circles, but because it doesn't really make too much difference because it's the back of a model, you don't really see that often, and also it doesn't look horrendous anyway. I could get away with that, but with this, it's actually a perfect circle, so that isn't really going to work, which is where the bevel modifier comes into play. I'll show you how to do it now. So if we go mesh, we'll go, where's my cylinder? Then we'll rotate that on the rotate on the y-axis, so it's facing that way. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but the thing is with this is that, like, the more accurate you want it to be, the more effort you can put into it, right? I want it to be as accurate as I possibly can make it, but it's not the end of the world if there's some little details that are not really that accurate. But like I said, it's up to you, whichever you want to do. So this is the mesh for this little edge bit here. If we go into modifiers and then look for the Boolean modifier, what we want is I don't know whether it's difference or intersect. We'll try difference for the moment, right? But we got this one selected, and then we'll use the eyedropper tool to select the cylinder, and then what that will do is, if we get rid of that cylinder, there's now a hole in it. It's as simple as that. It's a piece of piss. We'll do the same thing with this one. We appear that cylinder again. We'll go Boolean modifier, difference, eyedropper tool, circle bit, get rid of that cylinder. There you go, and it's easy as that. Right, so we'll deal with the actual like jagged edge bit a bit later on when we do our subdivision surface. But that's how you add the easy way of adding circles into things. And topologies wise, it's not the best, but if you're not 200% worried about topology, it's not the end of the world. Alright, so this is the part of the modeling process where I make the point about why it's so crucial to back your stuff up, right? Now, as you can see, we've got so many different cylinders here and cubes and whatever that it's actually ridiculous, right? But they all, apart from these ones down here, which are for the booleans, they all have their own specific purpose, right? But this is the reason why I say that it's crucial to back your stuff up so much, right? Because what we're going to be doing in a minute is we're going to be combining all the models together and then beveling the edges that we need to bevel, right? That don't need to be hard corners, that need to be soft, right? But the problem is that in order to do that effectively, all of our modifiers that we've got, we need to apply, right? Now, once you apply the modifiers, that's a destructive function, right? You can't, unless you've got enough undos in your depository to go back that far, everything that you apply is destructive, right? So make sure that you back up your Blender saves, right? Not for the sake of losing it, but in a sense losing it. But if you go File, Save as Copy, what that does is that means that everything you work on in this Blender save, if you make a mistake, you look at something and say, okay, that doesn't quite look right, I need to go back and alter that. You can go back to your backup copy of that Blender save, change what you want, back it up again, obviously, but you can then go back to the stage you were at before you made all the destructive, applied all the modifiers in that destructive workflow, but then you can change it all again, just do it all again. And if you keep backing up your saves every time you go back to the state before where you had all your modifiers in your list, that means that you can go infinitely back and change as many times as you want, right? Does that make sense? I hope so. I'm saying that a lot this episode, but this generally is what it is. It's just me hoping I'm making sense with what I'm saying. So there's a few little things that I need to add into this model, like this bit here and like these few buttons. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll be back once I've finished that. Alright, so I've finished modeling the little detail bit. So modeling wise, I think we're pretty much done. Now what I have done, just as a little added extra, is on the original model, there's the grip. So there's a bit of like a different color area around the grip. Now the reason why that isn't added into the actual model itself is because of poly counts and such, right? But I decided to add it into the model, make it actually part of the geometry, just to add a little bit of extra to it. You can choose whether to do that or not. I might get to a point where I'll back this up, I'll get it into Substance Paint to texture it, and I'll think it actually doesn't look that right, and then I'll just get rid of it. Right, so now I'm using the backup. I'm just going to go back and open up the original so I can work on the original. And what we can do is, now, depending on your workflow, you can do this one of two ways. You can either, and I'll show you both ways of doing it, right? So you can either combine all the meshes together and then apply your subdivision surface modifier, which will smooth everything, and then when you manually sharpen all the edges back up, you can then go around each of the model and then just unsharpen the bits that you don't want sharp and you want them to be smooth. I'll show you what I mean. So just to give you a rough example. So if I take this nose, for example, right? So if I go and apply, you've seen me do this a little bit before, but if I apply a subdivision surface modifier, right? What that does is that it just completely smooths and scrunches up the model. Right? If I turn it to auto smooth, it's a bit easier to see. But it just completely scrunches up the model, right? But then if I go into edit mode and then go edge select and then go select sharp edges, that will select all of the sharp edges on this mesh, right? And you can change the degree in which the sharpness is. If you want more sharp edges, if you want the tolerance to be more, then you can increase it. If you want tolerance to be less, then you can decrease it, right? But default 90% of the time works perfectly fine, right? So what you then do is if you click Shift E and then 1, that'll then sharpen all those edges and turn them completely smooth and back to normal, right? And that's how what you do with Subdivision Surface Modifier. Now, the only issue that Subdivision has is it smooths the model so it looks nice, but it increases the poly count, right? So at base level 1, so it basically goes from looking like this to, if I apply my Subdivision, to looking like this, right? So it increases the poly count, right? If I turn the levels up, so if I go up to 3 and then apply the Subdivision Surface Modifier again, you've then got even more polygons, right? So Subdivision Surface Modifiers are good, but if you're working on game assets where you're very limited to a certain poly count, then you have to be a bit careful with your Subdivision, right? So, and that's the reason why in game engines, things like this, like the grip that I've got here, isn't built into the model, it's textured, because it's just extra polygons that you can make do without, right? So if you're making game assets, then be careful with Subdivision. If you're using this for cinematic purposes, like I would be, don't be incautious. So like I wouldn't turn around and say, you know, set this to 5 and then make a massive, you know, this one gun has like 50,000 polygons, because that's stupid, that's silly, it's not necessary. But you can be a little bit more relaxed with your poly count because it's for cinematic purposes, right? And also, with the higher your poly count, when it comes into Substance Painter, the more polygons you've got, the more accurate you've got to be when you're actually painting stuff, which again is a bit of a pain in the bum anyway, so that's what you've got to be careful of as well. But because it's going to be used for cinematic purposes, I can be a little bit lazy and actually put a level 1 Subdivision surface on it, right? And because a level 1, that is perfectly fine. You can see it's not causing any issues whatsoever, right? Now, the other way of doing it, get rid of my Subdivision, because even then, like that, the Subdivision Surface Modifier hasn't actually done anything as far as the look of it's concerned, just auto-smoothing it has made it look perfectly fine. Now, if I get this back block here, right, it's just a cube, right? But in the reference, these edges on each of the front sides are curved, right? So if I go and apply a Subdivision Surface Modifier, that'll then shrink it, right, as we expect it to do. So if I go and select Sharp Edges and then go Shift E1, that blocks them out again. But if we select these two front edges and then we go Shift E and -1, that'll then curve it out, right? Now this is where adding more than one subdivision layer actually comes in handy, because I've set that up to 3, and that's gone and curved it pretty much exactly as the way the reference model looks. The problem with that though is if I go and apply it, that's not actually increased the poly count hugely, but it's increased the poly count in areas where it's not necessary. So if, let's say, for example, we do this the other way, where if I get rid of the subdivision, and then I select these two edges and go Control B for bevel? Yeah, Control B for bevel. Right, so then we're beveling that, and then I scroll my mouse wheel up and do that. That's done the exact same thing. Set it to auto smooth, but if I then apply a subdivision on top of that, A1 has not done anything to the geometry because it's already sharpened, right? But if I then set that to viewport level 1 and apply, there's a lot less polygons there, so your poly count is a lot more controlled, right? So it depends on what you're trying to bevel and what you're trying to smooth out. Some things might not actually need beveling or subdivision surface modifying at all, but that's what you've got to just be a bit careful of. Now, if you are going to go down the route of beveling the edges that you want to, what I would do is choose which edges you want to bevel first, then join all of the meshes together, and then on top of that, then do your subdivision, right? Because then otherwise, because if you try and bevel subdivisions, your edges that have already been subdivided, you're then going to increase your poly count even further. Does that make sense? So whereas like if I let's say decided, so if let's say for example, right, so we'll go back and test this one again. let's just turn off, can I get rid of a bevel? Yeah, that's fine, right? So if I go and add a subdivision surface modifier and set that just to level 1, for example, right? So if I then decide that I want to just manually bevel this after I've subdivided, that's then going to increase the poly count, and also it's going to cause issues because you can't bevel beyond sharp edges. So, but if I get rid of this edge, it's just going to look strange. So it's a bit of a subdivision surface modifiers are strange. But personally, if you want my advice, I would just go around your edges, go around your sharp edges, manually bevel them, and then apply your subdivision afterwards, and then just select all the sharp edges, and that'll sharpen everything else that isn't beveled, right? That's what I would do personally if it was me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go and bevel everything that I think needs beveling based off of the reference images. What I'm also going to do, I'm going to just straighten up some of these edges, because as you can see, they're a bit like skew width, they're a bit bent. So I'm going to just use my reference model to just, you know, bring this down, just straighten it up just a tad, just to make it look a bit more straight and uniform. Right, so I'll be back once I've sorted this model out. Right, so I think I've got to the stage now where I've beveled everything that I think needs doing. Like this bit, I did do an experiment with this. So I tried to bevel this, and it didn't quite work. However, I added my subdivision surface modifier to this bit, and then just deselected the sharp edges around here. And I'll show you what I mean in a second. But that actually worked better than beveling. So that is a bit of trial and error, whether you can see how that works if you're doing this yourself, right? So, also another point is, I say back up your Blender saves, which you should be doing anyway, and I also say, but I said earlier about backing up your individual parts, especially if you spent a long time modeling them. Another way to back up your entire model itself, if you want to do that, is if you go up, so let's say this is the collection that I've got here, right? So all of this is every single part of this pistol that we've got at the moment, right? If you want to back this up and duplicate that again, if you right click and click duplicate collection, that will duplicate that collection exactly, right? Now I'm not going to do that because I need to select everything inside this to delete it first. There we go. But so if you want to duplicate it and back it up in the own save itself, do that. That works as well. Alright, right, I know where I've gone wrong, and this is why it's so crucial to back up your stuff, right? Because now I can do this again, and it'll work perfectly fine, right? So what I need to do is I actually need to do my booleans again, but I need to subdivide it first, right? I just googled it, and somebody said do your subdivisions first. Something else I forgot to do was to apply my mirror modifier and my solidify modifier, right? So then now this grip bit works properly, right? So that's that done. Right, what I will actually do first, because I can't use this one again because it's basically in destructive workflow mode, I'm going to duplicate this again, get rid of that, so then if I make a mistake on this one, I've got another one to go back to. Right, so now we'll apply, no, not duplicate, we'll apply the mirror modifier, apply the solidify modifier onto this bit, and then what we'll do, we shall get rid of the cylinders that we don't need. So we'll get rid of that one, that one, that one, and that one, I think is all it is, I'm pretty sure. So we'll get rid of that. Where's that one? Oh no, there's two down there, so we'll get rid of that one as well. Right, there you go, joined all up together. And so now what I can do is I can add my subdivision. Do that, then go edit, select sharp edges, make that back to normal. Get rid of the sharp edges that I don't want here. Shift E -1, put that back to normal smoothness. Go back into the reference because we need to move these back again, like that. Push that back, and then push this one back and across and back. Oh no, not up, back and across like that. Cool. Then we can go get rid of that. So that's all as it should be properly. Now we can deal with the Boolean. Right, so if you want to bridge things together, so if you've got two gaps, if you select the edges on each side and then go Control E and then bridge edge loops, that will then bridge them together, right? Which is what I'm going to do to fill in these gaps. Now what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to extrude this up so it's touching. I can actually do that on an axis so it makes it work a bit better. And then what I can do is if I bridge it up so it's then touching, so it's going through this mesh here, it eludes the fact that there's a hole there, but it's not so, actually no, that's a bit too far, isn't it? So I'm going to bring that down and I go F to fill it, right? So I'll show you what I do with that again. If you go, so select all your edges, extrude on, in this particular case it's the Z-axis, Z-axis up, and then click F to fill, and that fills that up, right? It's not completely foolproof, it does screw the geometry a little bit, but it's better than what it was, right? And then just auto smooth everything, and that's that done. That I think is looking pretty good, right? As a mesh, as a model, I don't think that looks that bad personally. I think we've done a pretty good job there, right? So now next step. Now this is sort of the easy but the tedious bit. Right, I'm going to explain this in a really weird and wacky way, right? And what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave a video in the description to a video by Blender Guru talking about how to UV unpack things the proper way and explain exactly what it does, because I can't really explain it because I don't particularly... It's a difficult thing to try and explain, but you've got to, in a sense, if you want to do this properly, you've got to mark your seams where you want your model to unfold from. Right, so if let's say, if I was to have a box, right, if each of the box was a seam, that seam would be what flat packs open, right? So that's the cut in the box, right? And it's the same with this. You've got to try and find out where your seams are going to be so it can unpack properly. I'm lazy, and because I'm doing this just for myself, it doesn't matter. If I was doing this for like a client or I was doing this on a commission, it wouldn't matter too much, right? No, it matters a bit more and I take a bit more care and comfort into doing it. Because it's just for myself, I know how to do it properly. I know how to make do with what I'm going to be doing now. So what you need to do is you go sharp edges, select all sharp edges, and then go Control E, and at the bottom you see Mark Seam. What that then does, that turns all of those edges red, right? So that's all of your seams. That's way too many seams, but it does the job for what we're doing today. So you select everything, click U, and then go UV unwrap. And what that does, if you go into your UV editing tab, that then unpacks your model completely, right? So that is your entire UV. Now, ideally, you need to organize this about a bit. You can do this manually by selecting the different bits, then just sort of move it, select the different bits, then just sort of moving them around as to where you need them to be, right? But because I'm lazy, I've got this add-on called UV Pack Master, right? Now what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to just open this file up, because I'm using Blender 3.6. It's Blender 4 that's got the UV Pack Master installed in it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how that works. But essentially what it is, it just automatically packs your UVs up in an easier way than what you would be able to do yourself. So let me just open up Blender 4 and with this, then I'll show you how UV Pack Master works. Right, so back in we're in Blender 4 now, and I've got UV Pack Master open here. So literally all you do is you highlight everything and then click, and then I personally, settings I use, I set my precision to 1000, and then I click normalize islands, right? Just some little settings just to help a bit better, right? So then I click pack, and automatically that packs it, uses up the space a lot more effectively, right? Now, with something like this, because the model itself is very blocky, you shouldn't have any overlapping UVs, right? But if you've got, let's say, like my clone trooper helmets, for example, I had endless troubles with overlapping UVs, right? So I would personally check them, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just show you what happens if you have an overlapping UV, right? Go select all, and if I move this just so it's overlapping like that, so let's say that's where you that is what your UV is actually looks like, and you just leave it at that. I'll show you what that looks like and how you know that's wrong. Right, so I've just quickly baked my curvature, ambient occlusion, and normal map. And if I go into paint view, you can see it automatically, and I'll show you what these dark areas are as well. I'll deal with that in a second. You can see here that you can see the shadow of the UV map where it's overlapping, where we moved it to overlap there. And now that you don't want, because that's going to make your mesh, especially when you move into, like, let's say, doing edge wear and you're using generators, that's going to look awful. So you need to make sure that nothing is overlapping in your UV editor, right? Because otherwise it is just going to look weird. Now, like I said, this one we were quite lucky with. It didn't overlap anything by default once we packed it. But in the event that it does, that's what you need to be careful of. Like I said, with my clone troops, it's actually overlapping a little bit here, actually, you're looking at it. So that's what you've got to be careful of and look for. So if I just move that out of the way, and it probably is doing the same on this side as well. There we go, like that. So that you'll see issues with in Substance Painter as well. It's not so, it's a bit more subtle, but and you probably might not notice it, but if you see it, it's always good just to check it just in case. What I'm going to show you how to fix these shadows here. Now, what that basically is that's inverted normals. So because, and it usually happens when you duplicate and invert. So one of the the downsides of doing the duplicate and invert mesh thing that we were doing to get the same geometry on the other side without remodeling it again is it inverts the normal. Right, now that's an easy thing to fix. All you do is you go into edit mode, select all, then go to mesh, normals, and recalculate outside. What that should do is that should get rid of all of that black area, because what that basically is that is your ambient occlusion essentially. So everything on the inside is dark, everything on the outside is light, right? So ambient occlusion is basically fake shadows. And as you can see, we calculated everything to the outside and it's now looking perfect. Right, that's exactly what we want and how it should look. Right, so that, mercifully for me, because I am now on I think this footage is now 3 hours worth of raw footage, I think, worth of recording. That is the end of this tutorial. I'm not going to show you how to do things in Substance Painter because we've done endless videos on that. I'll link one of those in the description down below. I do have plans on doing another Substance Painter video, but I've done 3 of them already, I think, or more at this point, probably. So I don't really see the point in doing another one, because I'm just going over the exact same thing that I was doing before. That is what I have time for in this video here. I thank you all very much for watching. If you did enjoy, don't forget to smash that like button and hit that subscribe button for more awesome gaming tutorial, whatever type content. If you have any questions for me down in the video description, leave it down in the comment section down below, excuse me. And if I can't help you, I'll send you to somewhere as best as I can to help you solve your problem where I can't. So, hope you guys have enjoyed, and I shall see you all later. Bye!